So welcome to our daily conference update from the Findhorn Foundation at our Climate Change and Consciousness Conference. And today we have three guests and we are very curious how their day was. Jonathon Porritt, you have been involved in climate change and mainly in the political field. How was your day today? What was your highlight of the day?
Good. Today was good. Birdsong at 5 o'clock was my absolute highlight.
What happened?
It reminded me why I'm so pleased to be away from the busy parts and towns and cities of the south of England.
And you were in nature or you were in silence at 5 o'clock?
I was in bed.
You were in bed.
Yeah, no. I wasn't doing anything peculiar. I was just in bed being woken up by the birdsong.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's good.
Mumta, you're a lawyer in nature, for nature, I have to say. What was your highlight of the day?
My highlight of the day was having a chat with you, actually. Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah, it was. I felt it was a nice moment of connection when, after listening, we were asked to stop, and just take a moment, what's alive with us, and I could feel this tension in my neck, and I was just, just kind of breathing into it. And then there was a sharing, you're like, what's alive for you? I'm like, I'm just feeling the breath in my neck. But then after that, we connected on some quite deep topics, which, have been present for me since arriving here. The whole theme of activist burnout, the whole theme of, we've had, like, Polly Higgins is very ill. We've had the activist in America who dropped out through burnout. When I went up to speak to Vandana Shiva, I could tell she was not feeling very well. And on a daily basis, I hear of activists that have been killed in South America. So this raises deep questions. Is the way that we're approaching this movement right? Is it life-sustaining? Why is this happening?
Yeah.
This question came alive.
Yeah.
And we had a moment
Yeah,
sharing
and actually that moment actually inspired me to invite you in this conversation. And this topic also will be part of the conversation we'll have today. So, but let's first go to Jarvis. Welcome as well. You're the founder of MyGreenPod.
MyGreenPod.
MyGreenPod, sorry,
Yeah.
slipped my mind. What was your highlight of the day?
Well, for me, it was Vandana Shiva's talk, because she not only eloquently explained the situation, the dire situation that we're in, but she also infused and embodied an energy that I recognised, and it was extremely empowering and passionate and tangible as an energy, and I felt that really lifted the vibration, perhaps the level of consciousness, perhaps in the room, to a more empowered state. And I felt just before that we were all feeling a little bit like, what are we going to do? There's only like possibly 2 or 12 years. How the hell are we going to get out of this mess? And then suddenly everyone was like, oh yes, I've got power within me. This lady here is not only making a lot of sense, she's also enigmatic with a vibration and frequency that we all have. So for me, that was it. It was a reminder of, oh yes, I perhaps could be a superhero in this time.
Nice. This is a nice moment. Jonathon Porritt, let's start with you. You're over 30 years active in the climate change movement. How do you feel about the current status of our response as humanity to climate change?
Scientists started warning us, politicians, about what was going to happen with the build-up of these greenhouse gases, CO2 and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, at least 30 years ago. So this knowledge has been sitting in our midst for a very long time, and the fact that it is now getting a great deal worse is a consequence of the amount of these gases we put into the atmosphere. People think it must go back centuries. Actually, half of the pollution, half the greenhouse gases we put into the atmosphere has happened in the last 30 years. So it's something that has been there in my life for a long time. I'm massively excited by the emergence of Extinction Rebellion and by the school strikes, which I think are very interesting at this stage, because they're basically saying to us as adults, do you think you've done a good job on our behalf in terms of the future? So there's some new energy there. It's powerful. It's really important. And I think everyone's beginning to get a sense if we don't do it now, then it really, this phrase, "it will be too late," will actually genuinely come true.
Can you explain like why? Because in my country, for example, there was like the last elections, a party which won hadn't so much attention for climate change, which tells me that a lot of the people still don't believe in climate change.
No, there are a lot of politicians who don't subscribe to this.
But not only politicians, also maybe civilians.
Yeah.
So can you explain like why it's so important to give attention to climate change?
What we're looking at the moment is an acceleration in all of the impacts of climate change. So as the gases end up in the atmosphere warms. This warming effect changes all sorts of things down here on planet Earth. So we've seen an acceleration in terms of extreme weather events, droughts, floods, wildfires. We've seen an increase in average sea level rises. So people are beginning to get their heads around the fact that as the oceans warm and as more of the ice melts, we're going to see centimetres of sea level rise and possibly metres even in this century. We're beginning to see the impacts on agriculture as things get hotter. Crops find it harder to achieve the same kind of productivity as they did before, and that's now a huge worry in terms of feeding a population on this planet, which continues to get bigger every year by about 83 million people. So all of these impacts are now suddenly materializing for real in our midst. Before this, it was all about computer models. If we reach this level in the atmosphere, this will happen, etc., etc. Now, every day you hear the latest climate story from somewhere in the world, and they are all bad stories. And the reason why politicians now cannot avoid this any longer is that it's only 1 degree centigrade of warming that is causing all of this damage today. The likelihood is that we will go to at least 2 degrees centigrade and possibly 3 degrees centigrade by the end of this century, because we're still putting so many
and you
emissions
say
into
like
the atmosphere.
politicians cannot avoid it any longer. Do you see a movement in the political side that people are embracing the topic, or?
Not really. I mean, honestly, I think most politicians are completely bloody useless when it comes to dealing with these issues. They're kind of what falls into the box of wicked issues. They don't really know what to do about it. They seem to be long-term things. Mm-hmm. They weren't brought up in any system that showed them how important this was. It's exactly the same with biodiversity. Most politicians, you talk to them about biodiversity in the natural world, and they sort of think you're some tree-hugging hippie, rather than the fact you're talking about the underpinning of life on Earth. So we've got a massive legacy of really poorly educated, badly informed politicians who, I suppose, have never had enough of a push from their electorates to want to make a real difference.
Yeah. So let's go to the electorate, Jarvis.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You are in touch with a lot of people because you have this magazine about a green lifestyle. Mm-hmm. What do you see? Do you see like people is this audience growing?
It's growing massively and has done certainly within the last 18 months. It's really exponentially growing. I mean, we've been in this space for 10 years and we've watched a citizen's journey in the way that they consume. And it's a very simple journey. If you're buying an organic milk product, then you're literally infusing your body with an organic product. So therefore it's changing something within your makeup, and that then creates perhaps more awareness in wanting to live in another way, not necessarily with the mind, but just by the way the body's responding. So we've seen this journey, and it's, energy is a big one. There are lots of new 100% renewable energy companies in the market now. And we backed one that had 30,000 customers just 3 years ago, has now got 500,000 customers. So, there is a shift happening. But I think that shift has been very much to do with mainstream media, because Blue Planet, David Attenborough's Blue Planet, and then there's some, the plastic story happened. But that's just that's just such a tiny drop in the ocean in comparison to every single thing that consumers or citizens or people or humanity need to change. So yes, we've seen a growth, but nowhere near enough of a growth, and that's what I think is really important about Extinction Rebellion and the Friday strikes, because we have to take notice. Because for years, the elders have been talking about it's important to do it for the children. Obama talked about it, and that was quite a big story. But now it's the children saying, you're not doing it, so we're going to rebel. And we've seen this coming. I mean, anybody who's got a little bit of common sense will have seen this coming. And the kids are going to be incredibly angry unless we shift very, very quickly. And that will change everything. So,
why do you think it's so difficult to embrace this topic, or to?
Well, it's not difficult to embrace the topic at all. It's just big business and politics and bureaucracy has played the game of trying to confuse people. So actually, if you spend a full year more or less outside in nature, so you connect with nature and feel the seasons change, you have a very different understanding of how the world works. So it's very simple, actually, and we can get into the simplicity of it. But actually, we're in such a mess. That's what makes it incredibly complex. But the reality of stopping the temperatures rising to the point of critical destruction is actually very simple. Everybody needs to stop supporting big business and the politicians that don't give a shit about our future generations.
You started like 10 years ago this magazine about a green lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you started that, and why did you put so much effort and time into creating a green lifestyle? Why do you do it yourself?
Because the story that I wanted to get out at the time was to do with consciousness and spirituality and how everything is connected. But there wasn't a market for it. So I thought, if I jump on the green climate change, global warming agenda, and we can build a connection with people through that, then as we evolve to this time that we're in now, I can now begin to talk about the real stuff.
So what's the real stuff?
The real stuff is that everything is connected, that we're all part of the same, that we've forgotten who we are, that perhaps we chose to come incarnate into this reality in order to evolve as a being, not just a human, but as a spiritual being. So I feel that's the truth of what's going on. So it's like a massive shamanic awakening for every person on this planet. And we've been doing that culturally and indigenously, through times for aeons. But it's been a very kind of small part of that tribal experience. And now there's, 8 billion people on the planet. So it could be monumental in terms of a shift. But I'm a deeply spiritual person, so that's the way I choose to live my existence, and I'm well practiced and have a daily practice in order to keep my vibration in that frequency. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we can come back to this topic later, but I would like to ask you, Mumta, like, just as we have human rights, you would like to give nature rights.
Yeah.
And I think it is related to the topic Jarvis is bringing up, the interconnectedness of everything.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
you told me earlier that you are, at this moment, you're trying to give a river rights. And can you explain a bit, like, why you think it's important to give this river rights?
Okay. So, touching on, from what Jarvis said, I feel it's important to bring a little bit of context to this. I used to be a lawyer representing investment banks, so I understand very much how the financial system works, how the economic system works, etc. And it was through an unexpected shamanic awakening that I found my being catapulted out of that and into a world that was both magical and mysterious at the same time. This involved a lot of unraveling of a lot of the codes that had been brought into my system. And somewhere along the line in this deep journey, I received the guidance to bring a project together that brings law and healing together, and that shifts the paradigm upon which the existing system is based, and is about the rights of all living beings. So as I started to research this and get deeper into it, I started to see how all of our societal systems are predicated on a structure of law that is out of alignment, not only out of alignment with the cosmic order, the cosmic way of things that Vandana spoke about today, but also out of alignment with modern science. We have a structure of law that underpins all of our systems, that is based on the rationalist worldview that was set in the Enlightenment period. Law and science have always moved in parallel with each other, but somehow law got frozen. And it's this structure of law that separates the human being from the rest of nature and treats the world as a machine rather than as being comprised of interconnected living beings and living systems, that has resulted in the development of an economic system that is based on infinite growth. It makes it legal to have a food system, an agricultural system that poisons the earth, and it makes it legal to get our energy sources in ways that deplete the earth faster than she can replenish. So the insight that came to me was that with a few pieces we can shift this system of law, which to me is like the DNA of our society. It's the codes by which our society, our collective being expresses, to be more aligned with the universal laws that govern all of life. And the first piece is to recognize that we are part of a whole system. So to recognize that we are part of a whole system, at the moment, the law only recognizes two forms of subject: human beings and entities created by human beings, such as corporations. And it ignores completely all of the other non-human living beings that we share the earth with. So this is the drive and the impetus behind bringing in ecosystems and species as stakeholders in their own right, represented as living beings, stakeholders within our decision-making structures, within our legal system, and integrated into all of the policy areas. As a first step, we are seeing the start of this movement in some countries like Bolivia and New Zealand. And one of the projects that I've been working on is a test to see if we can establish this structure of law with a town in the UK. So there is the Town Council of Frome, who I'm currently working with, and we are putting through the system the first rights of nature law, which recognizes the ecosystem of a river as being as having its own legal personality. That means it can be represented as a person would in court, and it would have its rights to its own integral health, which would then impact the way it creates a legal relationship with the river and the people, and that then impacts decisions that could be made that would impact the river by taking the actual needs of the river into account.
And what would be the effect of having such a law in place? How would it benefit the river and humans also then?
Okay, so basically at the moment we are trying to protect nature using a system of environmental law that is complicit with the meta system. So it's based on a mechanistic adversarial system that is just designed to manage the externalities rather than to reorientate the system itself. So by seeding these individual examples that come in, I'm also working to establish legal rights for ecosystems and species in European law. So I believe that the seeding of these does shift the consciousness. However, to get the full effects, you know, it's like saying people in Findhorn have human rights, but the people in Forest don't. You know, it's like the ecosystem here has rights, but the ecosystem in the next town doesn't. It doesn't make any sense because the ecosystem is one ecosystem. What you do to it there is going to affect, you know, what happens to it here. So this is something that really, you know, it's a deep shift. It's a change that has to happen on a big level. And it is not a quick fix. This is a complete reorientation of our systems towards where we need to go if our children, our grandchildren are going to thrive.
Yeah. And that's all about like how we relate to other beings on this planet,
Yes.
and also nature, of the rest of nature, because we are part of nature. But there is also a big question, like how do we act within humanity? And this question came up today because Bill McKibben was yesterday giving a speech, and he was talking about we are in a fight. We're in a fight with the fossil fuel companies and with maybe you would say politicians, to win the fight against climate change. And then one person stood up and he said, like, why are we using this word fight? Are we not creating the wrong idea? Don't we need to have more love? Or so I was curious about this question. Like, we were in a sharing today, and you had kind of you said similar things to me. Can you say a bit more about that? How you?
Yeah. So I believe very much that our thoughts and our words are powerful because they carry vibration. And I also believe, and I also see that this is now starting to become evidenced in physics, that that the vibration precedes the physical manifestation of something. So when we carry the vibration of fear, and when we carry the vibration of anger within us, we attract an equal vibration back. However, when we carry that vibration of love, I believe it's the highest vibration that we can carry. And war cannot get rid of war. You know, maybe it gets rid of fossil fuels, but it doesn't get rid of war. It doesn't get rid of this anger, this tearing apart of the human heart, the human condition. So my question really is, you know, I'm not saying don't do that. If you feel that's what you need to do, by all means do it. But where my energy is how can we raise the vibration of humankind to the level that it attracts a different vibration? I really believe that the whole fossil fuel industry and all this depletion of nature, the breakdown of the cosmic order of things, is reflective of the human condition collectively. And I feel it's only a raising of the vibration of the collective human consciousness that can shatter that and call forth something more beautiful.
Jarvis, any thoughts on this?
More feelings on it. I mean, I agree. And science has now proven that, you know, not only is everything energy, it's conscious, but it's not only conscious, it's information. And what science is now is actually proving is that, in fact, all of the information that is within our universe, firstly, is finite, not infinite. So there's only a certain amount of building blocks that you can ever put together, but the building blocks are not quite shaped in the right way at the moment. So by the information that we either put out or take in, that will change literally our cosmic hologram on the outside. So this is all a bit wacky, I know, to understand, but science has now proven this to be the case. And sadhus and gurus and people in India have been talking about this stuff for a very long time. The indigenous tribes know, they communicate with nature and with, you know, sentient beings and angels, whatever you want to call them. So clearly there are multidimensional frequencies of vibrations that we are all in communication with, probably at all times. It's just that there's a level of ignorance across humanity.
And how would you apply these principles towards like, are we in a fight against something? Or?
Well, a fight, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with a fight in its true sense, but killing each other is definitely not right. But perhaps we do need to stand up and be counted in order to stand up against the forces within our structure that are controlling the way that we live, because we're not really free, because we have to be slaves to the system. So once the system is broken down completely, which is happening, politics is breaking down massively now, and the banking, we all know that's a farce, and you know, so all of these systems are breaking down, and it could be astrological, it could be because we come from the Piscean age into the Aquarian age, and you know, therefore there's a natural process happening. But I think the fight is probably important, but a peaceful fight. So to stand up and perhaps stop working for companies that don't care, and to stop giving your money to companies that don't care, and to, you know, and to put your energy and vibration into something that is essentially love, then that could really shift things. And actually it's so easy to do.
Jonathon, it's easy to do. What do you think?
I don't share these opinions.
What is your
I
opinion?
think we're in the middle of the most important fight that humankind has ever had to deal with. I have no difficulty using that terminology at all, because the people who would like to maintain their power and their control over us and over the natural world see it in those terms. And frankly, most people in our world are innocent and, I think, dangerously out of touch with how power flows in the world today. So I haven't got any room for illusion about people in politics and in positions of power in business and in the financial services sector. They know what they're doing, they want to hold that power, and they will hold that power regardless of what happens on this planet. And they've done it very successfully for a very long time. So I am in the middle of a massive, great fight. And as Bill McKibben was saying yesterday, so is he, and so is everybody, trying now to reverse decades where the use of fossil fuels has essentially made slaves of us all to a world order, a kind of form of economic growth that is now threatening the very existence of human beings on this planet. Of course, it's going to be non-violent. I mean, to a certain extent, you heard Vandana say she is such a devotee of Mahatma Gandhi and has brought all of those principles of non-violence into everything that she does. When I was director of Friends of the Earth back in the 1980s, we all undertook non-violent direct action training for the campaigns that we fought at that time. And people were just as brave about doing things then as they are today. So for me, non-violent direct action is part of the deal, and it's an absolutely critical part of what's going to happen next. So, you know, we may differ here, not just on wording, but on the whole story about this, because my fear is if we don't fight now, we will be having some wonderfully entertaining and illuminating conversations about what we might have done in 10, 20, 30 years' time. They won't matter a jot, because it'll be too late.
How do you see it related to the topic of interconnectedness of all life?
I can't see any problem about that. I mean, I was just as much concerned about nature and the indivisibility of life on Earth as anyone else, or anyone here at Findhorn, I should say. There are an awful lot of people who really don't give a fig about the indivisibility of life on Earth. But for me, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to think through the obligation that we have as citizens of this Earth and as connected beings in this Earth, celebrating its astonishing beauty and sacredness. It doesn't stop me from saying all of those things are part of the reason why I'm up for the fight. That spiritual dimension to what I feel is what, in some respects, has kept me going for 45 years doing this. And I suspect will become an increasingly important part over the however much longer I have to go on doing it.
Can you maybe reply? Like, you're basically saying, like, it's nice, this talk, but we are in a fight, like, face reality.
Well, I feel, that obviously things like the Extinction Rebellion are a force of nature. They're also an expression of the indivisibility of life speaking through the human being as well. So just as in a human body you have antibodies, which fight pathogens, you also have other parts of the human body. You don't have only antibodies. So I feel, that I cannot question the intelligence and the complexity of the animating forces of life. I cannot say with certainty that I understand what causes climate change. I cannot say with certainty whether we have time or whether we don't have time. But I know that time is not linear.
But you can say with certainty what causes climate change. I'm sorry to interrupt, because I'm very nervous now that an awful lot of people who have an awful lot of knowledge and insight into these things will still think that they can't speak out and say categorically, this is what causes climate change on the planet today. I'm amazed that you can sit there and say you don't know how to answer that.
As a person who used to speak out very categorically about it, I found that the deeper I go, the deeper I understand that there is much that I don't know.
Well, that I don't differ from that.
And so coming from that place, there are the architects of the future, and there are the stoppers. You know, Joanna Macy speaks about the 3 levels of social change. There are those that stop, and then those that create the alternatives, and those that bring the shift in consciousness. You know, we need all 3 levels for a movement to succeed. So
But
yes,
I think-
whilst I'm not against. You know, if people feel an impulse strongly, then
But I think you
They
both
should
agree
do
on
it.
the seriousness of the situation, right?
yeah,
That's where you refer to.
I feel that there is an urgency to act, but I differ in where the action comes from, where the shift comes, and at the same time, the action needs to happen at various levels, and I'm happy that, you know, if others feel animated in a
Yeah.
different way, that we are all part of one integrated whole. But equally, we need the long-term shifts. We need the long-term changes. We need the big structural changes.
sure.
And they cannot be done overnight.
Nope.
But we do
You're
need
nodding
to
here.
have them.
Well-
Otherwise, we just crash and burn, fight, then the next fire, then the next fire, and the activists are dropping dead like flies.
Well, let alone very, very large numbers of completely innocent human beings and creatures on this planet. I mean, that's the story. But I guess the thing for me is I'm fascinated by all of these things. I'm involved in many different causes, and to do with social justice, to do with intergenerational justice in particular, the shape and quality of our democracy. And all of those things will continue to play a really important part in my life, as they do in many other people's lives. But I just know if we can't make the difference we have to make over the next decade, those causes will never, they won't be future generations of people worrying about social justice, because our world will be engulfed in this climate-driven holocaust. I'm sorry to put it like that. That is now incontrovertibly going to happen. And both of you have said science is telling us this today about various things that you're passionate about. Wow. I mean, that's quite a controversial set of statements you made about what science is telling us. Science is telling us far more firmly about what is happening with unfolding climate change. You've got to acknowledge.
No, I absolutely acknowledge it. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But I'm also in the space that the Earth, which I believe is a living being, and the universal, the laws of nature, if you like, that operate our universal field, are in relationship, right? So you're right that all of the I don't know what they are, manipulators in our global societies, which are controlling and keeping most people living like slaves, have created this set of information that is then being acted out. So all I'm trying to say is that there is a possibility that if we can communicate a different message, that the very power of that coming from the masses rather than the elite could actually begin to shift. But I'm totally with you on the fact that we only have 10 years, 10 to 12 years to turn this around. I mean, I could see that 10 years ago, and now we're 10 years beyond, and you've been seeing it for 30 years. So, but it's how do we get people to how do we mobilize people in order to do that? And I believe it's to do with the information that we're putting out there. That's all. I mean, we're actually all saying very similar things. Certainly, you and I are saying the same thing. But I think there's a more spiritual aspect to this as well, and I do believe that human beings have lost connection with that spiritual body. We are very much living in the physical, the emotional, the mental, and I believe, because I've had access to live it, that there is a spiritual body. And when you're able to tap into that wider field, I know you're a spiritual guy yourself, I know you are, but what I'm seeing is that there's very practical situations that we have to deal with because we live in a practical 3D reality.
And on that note, so we agree about the seriousness of the...
Oh, absolutely. It's yeah.
I don't know, you as well?
Well, on the question of time, and if it's a question of motivating people to take action, I would say that a large number of people being told we have 10 years to live, and that, it's the product of this huge, big systemic mess, and we have 10 years to reverse all of that. Most people would say, I'm taking my kids and I'm going up to the mountain, you know. Or, well, what do? I have a house, I've got to put food on the table.
But I think the question is, like, the scientists say, like, we have 10 years, or we have, like, let's say, it's going in the wrong direction. We face mass extinction. Are you on the same level? Just to get it clear.
I'm saying that I cannot say with 100% certainty that just because scientists say that we have 10 years, that we actually have 10 years. But if we reinforce that belief that we have 10 years, that's what will manifest. But I believe that in reality, we could have more time if we create more time.
But do you see, like, do you believe the diagnosis instead of the prognosis? That the warming of the earth, the cutting of the forest, melting of the ice.
Absolutely. I mean,
that's the things where you refer to, right?
I believe that the orientation of human society is against the order of life. And if that continues, it will continue to unravel life. And we do need to make deep shifts. But I feel that these shifts are deep shifts, and they need to happen on a very deep level. And so if the question is, how do we motivate people? Not everybody is going to become an extinction rebellionist.
We don't ask everybody to become
But everybody
a rebel.
can shift their consciousness.
Well, you see, that's such an assumption. I mean, it isn't as easy as that, as you know. There are very, very large numbers of people who might feel even more unnerved at the prospect of a really, really deep shift in consciousness, as they more unnerved by that than by the prospect of becoming an active protester against climate change.
Okay, well, this question is all about, like, the whole topic we have today, this week in Findhorn, about climate change and consciousness. We have a conference every day. We talk about, with free guests, free participants, the keynote speakers, about this topic, what happened today. And tomorrow we are again at 5:30. I will thank my guests for today.
Thank you.
Thank you much for this
Thanks very
animated
much.
conversation. And we will
didn't get
hopefully
round to
to see you
death.
tomorrow. Bye.